Hi guys, today I'm going to be planting my watermelon seeds. I asked you to send me your watermelon growing questions the other day and I got a lot of questions. I'm going to try to answer them all. If I mess up mispronouncing your name, I apologize in advance. The first question is from Jess M. and he or she wants to know, is it possible to grow watermelons in small yards and containers? Yes, it is. Last year I grew a bush sugar baby watermelon in a container and it worked out really well. Watermelons do have really large, extensive root systems, so you do need to use a big pot. Use the biggest pot that you can find. Because the roots are so extensive, your watermelon plant is going to need to be watered a lot. But if you put some mulch on the surface of your soil, it will help you and you won't have to water quite as often. The next question is from CLO. And they want to know, what fertilizer soil preparation do I use to get the best watermelon growing success? I'm not loyal to any particular brand of fertilizer, and I use different fertilizers every year. When I go to plant my watermelons out, I usually use some granular fertilizer, something that's slow released. Last year I used Eco Scraps. The year before that I used another brand of fertilizer. Then a couple times during the growing season last year, I used a liquid fertilizer on my plants. I used Miracle-Gro. I know a lot of people don't like that brand, and that's fine. You can use a different brand of liquid fertilizer. How often you need to fertilize really depends on your soil's fertility in the first place, the type of soil that you have. I have clay soil, and once nutrients get into the soil, it holds on to it longer than somebody that has sandy soil. Sandy soil is very permeable. Somebody with sandy soil would probably have to fertilize more often than I do. I believe that adding organic matter to your soil, like leaves and compost, is more important than what fertilizer brand you use. Every fall I add fallen leaves to my garden. You can mix them in a little bit if you want to, or you can just let them lay on top of the soil. The leaves will break down and provide some nutrients to your soil, and your soil structure is going to be better. It's especially important to get organic matter into your soil if you have clay soil and sandy soil. Those are soil types that are usually lacking in organic matter. I don't mow my leaves with a lawnmower or anything like that. I don't chop them up. I just put them right on the garden. Before I plant my watermelons, I add compost to the soil. I have used both homemade compost and bagged compost from the store. I have bought bagged cow manure from the store and mixed that into my soil. Last year I added aged chicken manure to my soil. Watermelons are heavy feeders and they really appreciate all that stuff. It's so much easier to just put the right stuff into your soil than worry about fertilizing all the time. That's just how I do it, guys. Subha Rajan, I'm sorry, I know that I messed your name up, says, I am growing in a large pot. If it touches the ground of the terrace, will there be any harm? For coolness, I am spreading coconut leaves. I'm not really sure because I don't know how hot it gets where you live, but if you're worried about it, I think spreading something on the ground is a good idea. This year, if you find that it wasn't good enough, then you can always trellis your watermelons up. Grow Me Something Mister wants to know if it can be too hot to grow watermelons, and he also wants to know if it's true that they are heavy feeders. I have wondered about that myself, and it is a really good question. I'm always suggesting to people to use black landscape fabric and black plastic to keep their watermelons warm, but I am only speaking from my own experience growing them in a middle of the road kind of climate. There may be places where black plastic would fry the plants. I don't know, so you definitely need to do some research if you live somewhere hot. Who knows, some people might be better off mulching their plants with wood chips or leaves. I did go off topic a little bit there, and you did not ask me about plastic. But since you mentioned heat, I thought that would be a good time to bring that up. It's something I have wondered about. For the people that live somewhere way down south or just somewhere really hot, you can always Google watermelon plasticulture. in your area or state and see what turns up on the internet. Grow Me Something Mister also mentioned that he has grown watermelons before, but he has not always been able to get them to the size that he would like them to be. To answer your second question, yes, they are heavy feeders. I know I'm repeating myself in this video. Compost, manure, etc., blah, blah, blah. The tip that I can offer about fertilizing is you can use a balanced fertilizer, or you can use something that has higher nitrogen. Nitrogen will help your vines and leaves grow large and healthy, which in turn is going to help your fruit grow large. But once your plant starts to flower, you should cut back on the nitrogen. You want your plant to be putting energy into making flowers so you can get fruit, rather than growing larger vines at that point. I hope that helps you in some way, and I hope you get some big watermelons this year. Malia Hearn wants to know what are some tips for growing seedless varieties. Malia, I've never grown seedless watermelons before, so I do not know a lot about it. I'm not going to pretend that I do, but I do recall reading that you need to plant normal seeded varieties amongst your seedless varieties, because the seeded varieties act as pollinator plants for your seedless varieties, if that makes sense. Other than the pollination thing, I would imagine that growing seedless varieties is exactly like growing seeded varieties. Nancy Plants says, can you recommend any shorter season varieties to grow up north? That depends on what up north is. I live in southern Ohio and I can grow any watermelon variety that I want to. If your summer's hot and it's long enough, you should be able to grow any watermelon. If you live somewhere with a cool summertime, then there are shorter season varieties that you can try. I would recommend starting them indoors a month before you plan on putting them in the ground. That'll also help you get a little jump start. Blacktail Mountain has a days to maturity of 70 days, so that's an option. There's a variety called Bozeman watermelon, and from what I've read, it was bred specifically for growing in a northern area. So you might want to try that. Early Moonbeam is another sweet Siberian. I haven't grown all of these varieties, but they are out there. Just keep in mind when talking about average days to maturity, it's really only accurate in perfect growing conditions. So if you do live somewhere cool, it probably is going to take longer for them to reach maturity. Both black plastic and black landscape fabric helps to keep your soil warm. Watermelons like to have warm soil, and it will help to speed up the growth of your watermelons. The next question is from Fresh Cut KY, and she says, I need so much help with these. Do you start them indoors first? When mine grow, the plant is always so small and pathetic looking. How do I get a giant, healthy looking vine? I really want to be successful this year. You can find most of the answers to your questions in previous statements that I've made in this video. But to add to what I've already said, it's also really important to make sure that you give your watermelons their own space. They don't like competing with other plants. I know that finding that extra space can be really hard to do sometimes. There's always the option of growing your watermelons vertically and trellising them. To answer your first question, I do start them indoors under grow lights. If you don't have grow lights, that's okay. You can winter sow them. I think they would be fine. They do like to be warm, so I think that if I was going to winter sow them, I would start them out in my 2-liter bottles, and then I would probably bring them in every night just to make sure they're staying as warm as they like to be. I hope all that information was helpful, and I hope that you're able to grow a really nice watermelon this year. Stacy Colopi says, I failed 2 seasons in a row with watermelon. I think they weren't planted deep enough. Please make a video. I have a decent sized watermelon growing playlist you can find here on YouTube. I'll post a link below and you can check those out. If you watch my videos, you'll be able to see how deep I put my plants in the ground, how deep I plant my seeds. Lucas Grows Best says, I wish I could grow watermelons, but it is too cold in zone 5B, right? Not necessarily. I know you're in Canada. Are you using the USDA hardiness zone map I just want to be sure that we're talking about the same map, because honestly, I'm ignorant to what kind of hardiness zone map that you guys use in Canada or how it works. But the hardiness zone map in the United States is really only based on your lowest winter temperatures. In one area, zone 5B could be really warm and have nice watermelon growing conditions. In another place, zone 5B could have cooler summertime temperatures. If you want to try growing watermelons, I think you should try it. The worst that can happen is that they won't make it, or they'll never make it to ripeness. But there are things you can do to keep your plant warmer. As I've said before, the black landscape fabric or black plastic. You could even make a little hoop house or something like that to keep everything warmer. There is a guy who lives in Ontario, I believe, on YouTube. His channel is called Two Turtle Gardens. You might want to check out his channel. I don't know how similar your growing conditions are to his, but you might be able to get some ideas from him. Matthew Leisure says, why are my watermelon vines turning brown and the fruit is rotting off the plants? Without seeing your plants in person, or at least pictures, I can't tell what's definitely going on. Do you live in a humid climate? Because if you do, there's a good chance that your plants might be getting a fungal disease. My watermelons get a fungal disease called alternaria leaf blight or leaf spot, and it's not too hard to control with a little fungicide, which I do use sometimes. I've been lucky because there are fungal diseases that are much worse and can just completely kill off your plant and all the fruit. I'm going to post a link to some pictures and information about various watermelon fungal diseases, and you might want to check that out. Hopefully you'll be able to ID what's going on with your plants. If it's something really bad, you might not be able to plant watermelons in that area of your garden again for a year or two. A lot of diseases can live on plant debris in the soil, and if you put your plants in there again, they're probably just going to get the disease again. That's really all the information I have for you. Good luck. I hope you get it figured out. Isaac Frerich, or Frerich, sorry, I know I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Frerix, maybe? Isaac Frerix wants to know, what are you feeding the melons with? I did answer that in a previous question, and hopefully you got the answer you were looking for there. Lady Gardener wants to know the best way to prevent damping off for watermelon. And please show us your grow light setup and best fertilizer for growing huge watermelons. The best fertilizer for growing huge watermelons is taking care of your soil, amending your soil, manure, compost, organic matter, and then break out the store-bought fertilizers. My grow light setup is a 4-foot shop light in the dark corner of my house. It's nothing fancy. It's got a chain on it so I can lower it and raise it when I need to. I'm using T8 daylight bulbs, and that's it. That's all I have, is the one 4-foot shop light. Best way to prevent damping off. So damping off is caused by a fungus. If it's happening indoors under your grow lights, make sure you're using sterile potting soil. If you do get damping off, make sure you wash and sanitize any of the trays that you use for growing your little seedlings in. Make sure you're not overwatering your seedlings. I've seen where some people sprinkle cinnamon on the soil because it's supposed to be antifungal. You might want to put a fan on your seedlings to keep the air circulating. Make sure you don't have your plants crammed in there on top of each other. I know that's really hard sometimes. Brian from Never Enough Dirt says, I finally saw your PM about the Congo Watermelon Challenge. I nervously accept. Brian from Never Enough Dirt sent me some seeds for Congo watermelon, and we're both growing that variety this year. So I sent him a message back, and I teasingly said something about us having a watermelon growing contest, but this can be a real thing if you want it to be, and you should be nervous because I'm probably going to win. Rob Gordon says, do you find watermelon vines doing better in the 3rd month of spring than early spring, especially when night warmth is more consistent? I plant my watermelons out in May, and I'm usually harvesting them by August, so it must get hotter here faster than it does where you live. But yes, they definitely grow way better when it's warm. That's why doing everything you can to get your soil warmed up is so important. Morning Gardener Show says, I don't have much success with watermelons. I'm growing them now inside my house for the last 2 months. My soil is somewhat clay, but this year I plan on using lots of cow manure and compost. And I'm also trying black plastic. I think you can use the trash bag type of plastic, right? I think that would be okay, but you might have to put some holes in it if you don't have drip irrigation or something like that, just to make sure that water is able to reach the roots of your plants. The only reason I use the landscape fabric over the plastic is because the black landscape fabric does have little tiny holes in it that lets water in. You say that you've had them in your house for 2 months. That is a long time to have watermelon roots bound up in a container. 6 weeks in the house is really pushing it. But if you're using a big enough container, they might be okay. Just be careful when you're planting them out that you don't mess with the roots too much, because they really, really do not like that. And it will take them longer to get back on track after you get them planted. KY Hill Trapper 89 says, we're down here in eastern Kentucky. When do you suggest we start our watermelons in our small greenhouse that has a heating mat? We usually direct sow our seeds, so we are new to this. Well, if you're going to start them in a 16-ounce cup or something like that, you can start them a month early. If you're starting them in little seed cells, I would only start them a couple weeks early, which I hope answers the next part of their question. They asked, do I see any drawbacks to using plant cells and not potting soil? I'm not sure I understand that question. If you're starting them in a very small amount of soil, I wouldn't start them too early. They also are saying that Yellow Moon and Stars did horrible for them last year, that they didn't taste ripe when they picked them. To tell if a watermelon is ripe, I know that a lot of people go by the tendril that's closest to the watermelon. If it's brown, they pick it. If it's green, they don't. This method is not completely accurate with every variety, and Yellow Moon and Stars is one that you need to let sit for several days after the tendril turns brown. I learned that the hard way the first time I grew them. I picked them right after the tendril was brown and they were not ripe. So I had to wait until the next year. The next year I figured out that if I let them sit 8 or 10 days after the tendril turns brown, they will be ripe. So if you grow them again, I hope that helps. They are really good watermelons and they're really beautiful too. Ardai says, I normally don't grow watermelons because they take up a lot of space. What is your recommendation for growing them successfully? I got the Moon and Stars variety because of your channel, though I don't know what they taste like. I even have the Sugar Baby variety because I heard it was a small variety for a small household. Thank you for any information. Watermelons do take up a lot of space. But as I said to people previously in this video, there are things you can do to maximize your space, whether it be growing on a trellis, growing in a container. Hopefully there was a lot of stuff in this video that will help you and give you some ideas about how to grow watermelons successfully. Thank you guys for sending me all your questions. If anybody else has any questions, you can post them down in the comments section below, and I'll try to answer them if I can. I hope you all have a great growing season, whether you grow watermelons or not. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.